Welcome back over to the Joey Osborne Show. I'm your host, Joey Osborne, for today's March Madness video. And of course, we are finally here. We are finally on March here, and it's time for some good old March Madness. So let's get into this bracket here, and let's give my predictions on how I think March Madness is going to go. And we'll see how accurate it is, because obviously, as we all know, these brackets, they never really ever survive that long. But hey, hopefully this year, fingers crossed, it's the lucky year for me, alright? Hopefully it's the lucky year. But let's move into, of course, the East section here first, with UConn against Stetson. UConn, of course, the number one team in the country at this point. Dominant season as they try to go back-to-back after winning last year. A lot of faces on this team, and then on the opposing side, Stetson, they've had a very good year. A lot of great things from them. Of course, obviously, when you're a small program, it's tough to go up against one of these teams like UConn. Yet, obviously, we've seen in the past teams beat these one seeds. Last year, FTU over Purdue, who I had winning too. That was the crazier thing. Another disaster. We'll see what happens. Looking on the Stetson side, their biggest win was probably against the UCF Knights. And obviously, they played Houston, got destroyed by Houston. So I'm going to say here easily, UConn's going to win this game, and most likely a landslide in this spot here. Moving on to Florida Atlantic University versus Northwestern. Northwestern finally having some great years. They built off being Purdue last year, and they've really built off. They've honestly become a very good team in the last 2 years. They're now in March Madness here, obviously, and playing against FAU, who was a top team last year, back here again for another shot at the national championship. And looking at FAU in this side, they have some decent wins. Texas A&M, that's an SEC team. That's a good win. Virginia Tech, that was a landslide. And obviously, Virginia Tech wasn't very good this year, so I'm not really going to say that was a big one. Beat the crap out of Liberty. Not surprised on that. But they did beat the Arizona Wildcats, who were a 2 seed. And they beat them 96-95 on that side. So that's very interesting to see. And definitely that's something to consider. But moving on to the Northwestern side, once again, they beat Purdue. They beat Michigan State, and they beat Illinois once. They also lost to Illinois once, lost Purdue once, lost Michigan State once, and lost to Wisconsin. So they're a very up-and-down team, in my point. They can be very hot and cold. However, to be honest with you here, I got a feeling that, you know what, I'm going to go FAU in this one. I think Northwestern's just too much up and down on now. And I think they could easily win this game. I think this one will go either way. But I'm going to take FAU here in this spot. Moving on to San Diego and UAB. Both back at it again here. Honestly, a lot of places to go here. San Diego has been great this year. Beating Gonzaga, beating Utah State, beating New Mexico. A lot of good wins there. Looking at, of course, UAB. They lost a close one to Clemson, who is a decent team here, obviously, in the tournament. But other than that, they really don't have anything other than they did beat FAU once. They do have that. So obviously, that's something to build off. However, I think San Diego State takes this one here in that spot. Moving on here, of course, to Auburn versus Yale. This one's interesting. I think Auburn's a very good team. They got some good wins against some good SEC teams. And of course, Yale does not really have any good wins other than Princeton and Cornell for the most part. They've just not done well against good opponents, and I just don't think that'll continue. I'm going to give Auburn the win here in this spot. Moving on to BYU and Duquesne. Duquesne finally in the tournament for the first time since 1977, and a lot of excitement for this team here to see what they can do. Of course, coming up against BYU, they're a very up-and-down team, have had a lot of great strides, have had a lot of, ups and downs here. Duquesne, on the other hand, they came out hot at the end now. Definitely think. At the end of the season, they came out hot, went in their tournament, and they outright won it. So a lot of things that can happen here. And I think definitely it's a matchup. And you know what? For the sake of it, let's have this be our first upset. Give me Duquesne over BYU on that side. They've waited 77 years for this game. I got a feeling here BYU is going to be on the bad end of this one here. Moving on to Illinois versus Morehead State. This one's interesting. I think, obviously, I'm going to think it's Illinois here. I'm just be honest with you guys. Morehead State, they've been decent this year. However, I don't think they've been good enough to beat Illinois. Illinois has had a great season this year. A lot of great things coming out of there, and they definitely have some. And definitely, of course, like most years, they are a good team. But looking at, of course, Morehead State, their wins really, they're against in-conference opponents. Like when they go out of conference, specifically in the Big Ten, they got absolutely destroyed. And you know what? Of course, Illinois being a Big Ten school, even though they did not play head-to-head, I can easily see this being a blowout, and Illinois gets that there. Moving on here to Washington State versus Drake. This is an interesting one. This is one of the tougher ones to predict here, just due to being two smaller scores. However, I do feel as if here, out of the two here, I think Drake is the better team here. They have the better wins. They have a better record, and honestly, they were a tough team to beat. This is a tough team. They're very solid on both ends. Their main scorer is scoring 21.8 points per game in Tucker DeVales. So obviously, they have some great firepower on this team, and I think Drake's gonna pull an upset here on number 7 Washington State. Moving on to Iowa State versus South Dakota here. On this one, I'm thinking here for the most part, I'm going to say this is Iowa State. They've been great this year. They've had a good rebound year from last year, and I think they're going to win the first game this year. Moving on to the West, North Carolina versus Wagner. I know they've had a good season, but I'm sorry, I don't think they can beat UNC. Give me UNC in that spot. Moving on here now, Mississippi State versus Michigan State. That'll be an interesting one here. Obviously, Mississippi State has a lot better record than MSU to this point here. When it comes to playing top teams, they really have not won many games in this spot. Moving on to Michigan. Once again, another team that they haven't won many games, but for the most part, they are pretty close games that they lost. And they did beat Baylor pretty good, which is kind of surprising. They beat Illinois pretty good, too. So yeah, I'm going to go Michigan State here. Give me a Big Ten score here. Give me Michigan State. Going on to the round of 32. Now, of course, St. Mary's versus Grand Canyon University, the one you always see online. It's like, you start wondering, is this an actual school? It is an actual school. They have a campus, and they actually have a good team. But obviously, looking at their team here, they're 29-4 for Grand Canyon University against a 26-7 St. Mary's College here on this spot. Looking at St. Mary's notable wins, they have New Mexico, they have Colorado State, and San Francisco Dons, and one against Gonzaga too. So that's interesting. Looking here for Grand Canyon University, they beat San Diego, Liberty, a good win. Louisiana Tech, no, good win. They played South Carolina, and that game was actually somewhat close, 75-68. So you know what, here? Give me another upset. Give me Grand Canyon over St. Mary's here in this spot. Moving on here to Alabama versus Charleston. This is a good old Southern matchup here. Of course, Alabama 21-11 against the 27-7 Charleston team. Looking at this spot, Alabama, only really big notable win they've had is against Auburn. They've played Purdue, they played Creighton, they played Arizona, played Tennessee. All losses are not really that close. This is definitely not the Alabama team from last year, I'll say that much. Looking at, of course, Charleston, win against Liberty. They did get blown out by Florida Atlantic. And that's really the only two I see here. But obviously, they've been good for the most part this year. And you know what? Give me another upset. Give me Charleston over Alabama in that spot there. Moving on here to Clemson and New Mexico. And I've been thinking about this one a lot. Obviously, Clemson, an ACC team here. And New Mexico, they've played very good this year for the most part. Of course, falling off a little bit toward the end now. But overall, they've had some great teams this year. Great games. And you know what? They beat San Diego State. They beat Utah State. They beat Colorado State. Give me New Mexico here. I want another upset. Give me New Mexico over Clemson here in this spot. Moving on to Baylor versus Colgate. Baylor, once again, another great season. Colgate, once again, back here again. They had another great year. But I just think Colgate, last time they played, they got killed. And it's going to happen again. Give me Baylor here on this spot. Moving on to Dayton versus Nevada. Dayton had a really slow end to the year there. They definitely struggled to the end, and they blew to their conference championship. Nevada's been solid all year, and I think Nevada's better than Dayton. Give me Nevada, though. Moving on to Arizona versus Long Beach State. This one could be an upset. I definitely could see it. Knowing Arizona's recent history in the tournament for the most part. However, Arizona has a lot of great wins this year on some very good teams. And obviously, if you look at Long Beach, the biggest one they have is against USC. So I'm going to give Arizona here in that spot. So moving on to here, of course, Purdue in their spot. Of course, this game still has not been decided yet between Mountain State and Graham. I still think Purdue's going to win. They're decent teams, but I don't think Purdue's can do what they did last year. I think that was a one-time thing. So I'm going to say Purdue wins that matchup in that spot there. Of course, if I'm wrong, I'm going to be very disappointed in myself because I really thought that Purdue would be fine this time, but we'll see. We'll see here. Of course, now Utah State versus TCU. Both great teams, but Utah State's been really good this year, really solid, 27-6. Give me Utah State over TCU here. Now going off here to Gonzaga versus McNeese. This could be an interesting one, obviously. McNeese being 30-3 against a 25-7 Gonzaga team. Of course, Gonzaga, they've not been themselves this year. They beat Kentucky, but they lost to Purdue and they lost to UConn, both pretty badly in those sports. And of course, they have 2 losses to St. Mary's, which were a decently sized loss. The one was a decent sized loss, the other one was a 2-point game. So obviously, a lot of things you can look at, but looking at McNeese here on their side, they really have not played anyone top in their spots, so we really don't know how good they actually are. But honestly, looking at the way Gonzaga has been this year, I think I'm still going to give Gonzaga here on this spot over McNeese. Moving on to Kansas versus Samford here. I think this one's going to be a pretty solid lead. Kansas, I know Samford's got the good record, but it's Kansas. They're a very good team. I just think they're too tough to handle for Samford here in this spot. Moving on here to Oregon, South Carolina. Another interesting game, and another one that I feel like obviously here, I think it's going to go South Carolina's way. So I'm going to give South Carolina here the benefit of the doubt. Moving on to Creighton, Akron. Once again, I think Creighton's just the better team, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here in this spot. Moving on here to our next one, Texas versus Colorado State. This one could be interesting. Texas has been up and down, but they've had some good wins. And Colorado State, once again, another team with some good wins, but they do have some ugly losses against other teams in the tournament. So I'm going to take Texas here in this spot. But now to our final one here in the round of 64, Tennessee and St. Peter's. This will be an interesting one here. And I just think this is Tennessee here. I don't think St. Peter's is going to pull off the magic that it did 2 years ago against Kentucky. I don't think that's happening. But who knows? It is March Madness, so maybe it will on me. But of course, moving on here to the round of 32. And now things are going to start flying now because we've done through all the prerequisites on all these teams now. You know who they are. And I just give my predictions here. North Carolina, Michigan. I think North Carolina wins this in a blowout. Give me North Carolina. Moving on to Grand Canyon University versus Charleston. This one, this is an interesting one. Let's look at the preview here for a sec on this side here. But let's see. What are the records? Yeah. What's the notable wins here? So I always want to check notable wins here before I give the decision here. Yeah, I'm going to take Grand Canyon University in this one here. So we have a 12 seed going to the Sweet 16 here. Looking at New Mexico versus Baylor. I'm going to take Baylor on this one. New Mexico, they've had a great year. I just can't see them getting past Baylor, though. And moving on to Arizona versus Nevada. I'm going to take Arizona in this spot. I just can't see Nevada getting past Arizona as well, though. Moving on to Purdue versus Utah State. I think Purdue's going to be out for events again this year. I am getting the Sweet 16 here. They're going to take down Utah State here in a very close matchup here. Moving on here to Gonzaga versus Kansas. Now, this one's an interesting one here. But I think I'm going to take Kansas in this spot. They've been more solid than Gonzaga has been this year. Gonzaga's still very good like usual. But I think Kansas is just the better team in this spot here. And I think that's going to be reflected in this tournament here. Moving on to South Carolina versus Creighton here. This is an interesting one. And you know what? I'm going to go South Carolina in the upset over Creighton in this spot. South Carolina's been very good this year. They're a very underrated team, and I think they're going to make some noise here, and I have them going to the Sweet 16. Moving on to Tennessee versus Texas. Now, this could be a very close one here. Both teams have been very up and down. Tennessee, of course, has some good ones against Alabama and Kentucky, and of course also Auburn as well. But they have a loss to Purdue and a loss to Kansas. On the Texas side, they have a win against Baylor, but a loss against BYU and Houston. So that makes things very interesting here in that spot. So definitely, I think here in that spot, I think we definitely could see here. Oh, we've got the horse 164 side. I was confused. I saw Houston was not in. Something was going on. Okay. This spot, I think Houston wins here, so we're just going to go over this quickly here. This spot, I'm going to go with Nebraska here. Scots versus James Madison. I think this is an upset here. James Madison's been really good this year. I got James Madison in that spot. Moving on to Duke versus Vermont. I'm going to take Duke here in this spot. They've been solid this year. NC State, the ACC champs versus Texas Tech. They got really lucky here. I think Texas Tech wins this pretty easily. Kentucky, Oakland. I'm going to take Kentucky here. This one's interesting because it could be Colorado or Boise State. But I think both of these teams are better than Florida, so I'm going to take that one in that spot there. Moving to Marquette, Western Kentucky. Give me Marquette here. Alright, so now we have the second half of the round of 32. That was looking a little thin, so I don't know what's going on now. Alright, well now we got it. So, UConn versus FAU. I think UConn takes this in a close one. San Diego State versus Auburn. I got San Diego State taking this one, once again, in a close one. Duquesne versus Illinois. Duquesne's magic wins out here. Illinois wins in a blowout. Moving on here to Iowa State versus Drake. This one's an interesting one. Let's take a look at the notable matchups here. Of course, a win against Houston, win against Kansas. Looks very good in this spot against Drake, who really, they don't have any really big wins. So I think I am going to take Iowa State in this spot here over Drake. Of course, moving on here to the other side of round 32. I think Houston beats Nebraska in a close one. I think Duke beats James Madison in another close one. I think Kentucky wins against Texas Tech in a close one. And I think Marquette will take a nice easy win against Colorado or Boise, whoever makes it in that spot. But now moving on here to the Sweet 16. I got UConn beating San Diego State in a close one. I would say here, I think Illinois is going to beat Iowa State here, so I have Illinois going here to the Elite Eight. Looking at Houston versus Duke, here's your upset. Duke takes it in that spot there as they beat Houston in a clutch matchup here. And I'm going to save this one, game-winning basket by Duke right at the end there. Of course, now moving on here to Kentucky versus Marquette. I'm going to take Kentucky here. I think Marquette's magic runs out here in that spot there. Moving on here down to the other Sweet 16, North Carolina versus Grand Canyon. Give me UNC here in this spot. I think they're going to come up in the clutch here at this spot here. Moving on to Baylor versus Arizona State. I mean, it's Arizona, not Arizona State. Arizona. I got in this one here. I got Baylor winning. Give me Baylor. Oh, I didn't pick between Texas and Tennessee yet. Uh-oh. I'm taking Tennessee in that one, by the way. Sorry about skipping that one there somehow. Moving on here to now Tennessee versus South Carolina. I'm going to take South Carolina in the upset here, I think. I think that's where I'm going to go on that spot here. Moving now to Purdue versus Kansas. I think Kansas is going to take down Purdue. Knowing Purdue's recent history, they normally lose in 32 of the Sweet 16. And I think this year, they go up against Kansas. I don't think they're beating Kansas. I'm going to have them over Purdue in that spot. So now moving on here to the Elite Eight and let the fun begin here. UConn versus Illinois. Give me UConn now in that spot. They take a big win. Now Duke and Kentucky. Very close matchup. But I'm going to say give me Duke here in this spot. They've been great this year. They have a couple of losses that haven't been the best. But I think they get the win here. So give me Duke and the Blue Devils in that spot. Moving on here to North Carolina over Baylor here. I think North Carolina wins that close game, but North Carolina pulls through right at the end. And now moving here to Kansas versus South Carolina. Let's preview this here, actually. Let's preview this, because I do want to check some things out here. So, Kansas, they have notable wins against Tennessee and Houston, and Baylor and Texas. But they also have some losses against Houston, Baylor, BYU, and Iowa State. Going up against South Carolina, who has wins against Kentucky, wins against Tennessee, so that evens out. They have a really bad loss against Alabama, which is interesting. And another bad one against Auburn. But they have a good one against Florida. And they have some other ones that are semi-close here. But I think I'm going to take Kansas here on this spot. I don't think we're going to see an upset here. Give me Kansas over South Carolina in that spot here. So moving on now to the final four here. UConn versus UNC. I'm going to take UNC here. I don't think UConn gets all the way here this year. I think UNC stops them right in their path here, as they are the first team to make it here to the championship game. Now let's look here at the other matchup here, Duke and Kansas. This is going to be the fun one here. Both 4 seeds, which is very weird. We have 1-1 and a 4-4, but that's just how it worked out here. Duke obviously wins against Baylor, Clemson, Virginia Tech. Loss against the Tar Heels, wasn't the best. A good one against Wake Forest, and then a close loss against them. And a massive win over Virginia. And then, of course, another close loss to North Carolina. On the Kansas side of things, good win against Tennessee. It's not good for them to lose here, but at least, it's a close game. Good win, another good win, another good win there. And then some losses, it's like, you probably should have won at least 1, 2, 3 of these. But I think in this spot here, you know what, I'm going to go with the ACC Magic. Give me Duke here in this spot. And we're going to have a Carolina showdown in the championship match here. North Carolina versus Duke in this one. It's going to be a very close game, but I have North Carolina winning here, as they will be your 2024 national championships. It looks like in this spot here. And we got a tie put here, so how many points? You know what? I'm going to go 167 in that spot. You want to know why 167? Well, only when I did my first package for a couple contests, I went in and I looked at the score of this game because I knew they played multiple times. I took the scores, I took the averages of them, and that's what I got. I got 177 combined points. So that's what we're going with there. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys for tuning in. And please comment, like, and subscribe, and tune in for more basketball stuff as we get close to the NBA playoffs here. You're going to see a lot more basketball stuff coming out. And if you're a hockey fan, a lot more hockey coming as well. Football, of course, you got the mock drafts and full spin. And I'm sure there'll be more stuff coming here soon. But thank you guys for watching and have a great day.